Hello, everybody. Today I'm here with Christian, a student of mine who is giving some hints or useful tips how one could learn, memorize, and repeat some basic facts. And Christian has detected a program which he's going to show you. Christian, please take over and give us some information on that Anki program.
All right. All right. First of all, I'm going to share my screen. You should be able to see it now.
I hope so.
Yes. Okay. So Anki is a program that allows you to learn things by heart as fast as possible. It doesn't help you understand things, but if it's about basically putting paragraphs into your head, it's one of the most efficient ways. And an advantage is if you set up your plan basically like a deck of cards, like flashcards, you just have to do it every single day and not think about it, and then you'll be set. The program automatically detects which cards you know and which you don't know, and will adjust what you learn based on that. So let's get to it. First of all, how to get it. It's free online. You can get it at apps.ankiweb.net, and you can also get it in the Android, on Android in the Google Play Store.
So use it, if I correctly understand, you can also use it on your smartphones, yes?
Yes. 1 second. Anki Droid.
Commuting time in the train or in the bus.
Exactly. So if you have an Android phone or access to the Google Play Store, you can download Anki Droid flashcards. It's the same program, and you can do it too. An advantage of it is that you can register an account, which is tremendously helpful because it allows you to store things online in a cloud, and you can synchronize decks. So for example, you're in the bus, you do 50% of your daily cards, and then you come home, then you can synchronize it with your computer and do the rest on your desktop. So it kind of allows you to split time as efficiently as possible. Okay, so when you download from the website I just showed, you will basically get an empty platform. It doesn't do anything on its own. You have to load cards into it, just as you would do with flashcards, like made of paper. So Anki decks can be downloaded from an online source, which is shared decks. So we might utilize this, or we might upload it in Moodle if Moodle allows it. And then you will basically get this file. Currently, I don't have this installed on my Anki, so I can show you how it's installed. So you would get this, you have this installed and open, you just double click it, and then you say close. And there it is. Next, you can go into your options, and you can set new cards per day. The default would be 20, and then you can click on it to start to study. So the first card is one I made for kind of like a manual on how to use this deck. 1 second. It got shuffled a bit, so I will have to take a look at it manually. Okay, how to use this deck. So we'll go by this one. So the front card would be how to use this deck, and the back card would be that it's meant for learn by heart purposes. You still need to read the slides. You still need to practice cases. It's simply for putting things into your head. When you, yes?
And a remark from my side, naturally, what's most efficient is when you work on slides or on textbooks or so, it's a way to, I think, a very efficient way to note down some questions for repetition, for repeating the stuff which you read just now. I always, during my study times, had a little booklet where I entered all questions for repetition, which I made. So when I read something, I wrote down questions. which by heart and in written form I afterwards answered the next day, and then I took 10 on top and so on. And this is exactly the same method which you can apply here. You read a text, you put down some questions for repeating that stuff into the program here, into the deck, and write down the answer. And the most efficient thing is usually not to answer the question of others, but to find one's own questions. And it might be helpful later to get confronted with the repetition question of others, just to see what the others found interesting. But you can be probably most efficient if you also use the program to design your own cards with your own questions. Sorry to have interrupted you, Christian.
It's okay. It was a valid thing to say. It's quite important to make your own cards, especially because I will give you like a preset amount of cards, but if it doesn't answer all of your questions, of course you have to add your own. So I will go into the deck a bit later, but I will so you can see how it looks and how you can do it. But basically, if you open a card, you can press space to switch from the front to the back. On mobile, you will have a big bar in the bottom, and then you have a few options. Mostly, you would press again if you don't know the answer of the card, or good if you know it. There's also easy and hard. Easy is for cards that you know quite well and you just want out of the way. And hard is for, I would say, more advanced options. I recommend only pressing good and again, because that utilizes the Anki algorithm in the most efficient way. Otherwise, if you press hard, even if you only review 20-30 cards per day, you're going to suffer, because the cards will keep mounting up day by day by day, and they will just increase. It's not nice. And easy isn't efficient because the cards will be sorted out into the known stack before you can really put them into your head. So the most efficient thing, the most efficient way to use Anki is to just do it every single day. You wake up, you make coffee or tea or whatever, and you open Anki and you just do it every single day without fail. And you don't have to worry about a lot of other things. Okay. Sometimes I know this because I do it myself. You might open a card and you will just get through it quickly and be done with it. This is kind of the wrong approach. So you might, by accident, look at the front, then look at the back and think, I would have known this, and quickly sort it out into good, when actually you don't know it. So you would look at the front, take a few seconds, think, what is the back side? Then you take a look at the answer. And if you don't know it, you have to press again. It takes a bit more time, but it makes sense. Sometimes there are cards that are a bit longer. For example, there is one on the systems of financial courts, which contains a screenshot from a slide that explains the whole overview. You don't have to understand 100% of it. Like 90%, 95%, 80% is okay. Enough to get the main message and to describe it to a decent extent. For example, below you can say, you can delete this card after reading and understanding it on desktop, and then it shows you how to delete a card. If you are asked about the content of this whole thing and you forget this bottom part, it's not that important. The main function is that you can tell someone else how to use this program based on the information of the card. So let's get into it. So it got a bit shuffled. I will sort this out before sharing it online, but the card is, what is a fee and which underlying theory determines its amount? And then if I hover over it, you can say shortcut. You can see that its shortcut key is space, and I can click show answer, and it gives you an answer. And then I can say again with 1, good with 2, or easy with 3. Good also is space. It's barely visible, but there's a slight border around it, like a tiny blue border, but it's probably not visible in the video. So I can either press 1 for again or space for good. which is also a very comfortable hand position on desktop. So it's quite easy to keep. So I will say, okay, I know this. And I started with 19 cards. This is a new card. So I will have to review it once more before I can sort it out for the day. Let's say this is a question and I don't know the answer. Then I'm going to have to review it twice more. And the deck is done when you're able to sort out all the questions. When you know every single answer for the day, that's good. So let's just answer a few, and then we can go into statistics of the day. So maybe this is better to look at if I click on my whole collection. So it shows you cards due today, tomorrow, and how many days in the future. It shows you on the calendar how much you did before, how much you have reviewed, and which card section, how many cards you have of which type. So new, young, mature, suspended, and buried, and the review intervals. So if you know a card well, you will see it more rarely. So for example, I have 61 cards that I only see every 2.5 months. Okay.
Yeah, and you should notice that by this way, you are trained to memorize things and not to forget them. Because when you answer such a question on a card which you either got or wrote for yourself, then you must be sure or can be sure this card will show up later. You will get asked that again and again. And so your brain learns that you are never allowed to forget something. And my recommendation would be start with the program. When you read something, do some cards, write down the appropriate answer, and then next time or next day when you learn new stuff, add additional cards and then do the cards again and again. My recommendation would even be don't only look at it, think, oh, rough idea, then press the button and, oh yes, I think I would have known this. But if you have the opportunity, just take a piece of paper, try to write down the answer in written form, because that really forces you to formulate your ideas in a precise way, and then press the button and compare. So you can really see where you had difficulties. Otherwise, you have only that vague feeling, I believe I've got all these in my brain. But if, for example, you have to reproduce a chart, let's say, which different kind of levies exist in the terminology for payments to the state. And now if you have to draw it on paper, it's far more easy to realize I have problems in reproducing the thing exactly. Or if you say, there is a list of 5 things which I want to memorize, then having to write down the 5 ones, probably in the right order, that really shows you if you are fluent in that or if you still have difficulties. And apart from that, that is exactly training for the exam situation, because in an exam you have to write down things. So if you just trained having a vague idea in your minds, then what will happen in the exam is you will have a vague idea, you will not be able to write it down correctly. And then probably afterwards, when you see a master solution for the exam, you would think, okay, I would have got that. Because that's exactly what you trained, having a vague idea, writing nothing down, and then afterwards seeing that you could have done it. Now, if you add that step of writing it down, it's probably better because it gets you used to comparing what you wrote and what's the exact answer and seeing where you are still not secure. Okay, now back to Christian. Sorry for getting rid of my ideas, but you know, old people have to talk all the time. Oh.
It's okay, no worries. Okay, so let's take a look at another aspect. You said that adding your own cards is quite important, and that's kind of the next point in my on my agenda. If you have an Anki deck, let's go back to the main menu. you can click add to a card. And this is the most basic setup. You have a front side, you have a back side, you press space and you can flip it. There are a lot of complicated setups that you can do, which allow you to utilize all kinds of media. I use this for language learning, and my cards have an image in them and sometimes an audio message that plays when you flip. So it can get quite sophisticated. But let's start. I chose this slide 114 ESTG, and then you can make a card based on this. So I can say, what is the content of section 1, number 4 ESTG? And then I can copy this whole thing. Maybe a few points are more important. So I would say natural person, you can make it red, and you can say neither, you can make it blue, and residence nor habitual abode, I will make it let's say green. So you can color code everything in order to fit your way of remembering. And now I will add this card.
Okay. I would have even preferred to analyze the contents of the slide. For example, one question would have been nice: which kind of persons can never be covered by 1.4 ESTG? Juridical persons, because I got that from natural persons. Or if you have at least one residence in Germany, can you be covered by 1.4 ESTG? And so to develop additional questions which remind you of that, or what are the, let's say, 2 or 3, I don't remember now, conditions required for the application of 1.4. First, natural person. Second, neither residence nor habitual abode in the inland. Third, income from Germany. So you would directly focus on how many requirements are there, number them, and make a list. Would probably be even better, just as a suggestion.
Well, those would be separate cards. In general, it's quite good to learn, especially paragraphs, both ways. So you would say, like, what's the content of 1.4, and then which paragraphs determines limited tax liability for natural persons, and then like you can make a few separate cards. You have to make it separate cards because you should restrict the amount of information on each card to a level that is as small as possible, but as large as necessary to get the main point across.
Or if you serve for a kind of a list, then it's always helpful to number the requirements, because then later you have in mind, okay, this paragraph has, let's say, 4 requirements, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you directly can memorize, okay, there were 4 things, and then you know if one is still missing. Okay. All these tricks which you will come across during working with things like that.
So now you've learned how to add a card, and I will just leave this in, and at some point when you work on this, you will see this card and you will know why it's there, and why it's 3-colored. So another thing to take care of is your options, your cards per day. Usually it's set to 20 by default. I recommend 10 unless, well, you can take a look at the days until the exam, and when you're done with the deck, you want at least 1 month of constant repetition until it's really in your head. So you need enough cards per day to leave a month of time after you're finished to review things until you write the exam. You would take a look at your cards per day by judging your retention rate. Your retention rate can be found all the way in the bottom of your statistics, the second last option. So it should be somewhere between 70 and 85% for learning cards. So it sorts by learning cards, young cards, and mature cards. Mature cards are those that have been reviewed thoroughly. Young cards are those that you have reviewed kind of like, yesterday, a week ago, but they're not quite in your head yet, and learning are those that you are learning today. So you want to focus on these two, and they should be between 70 and 85. If you reach a retention rate of 90% or more, it's a clear sign that you can take on additional cards. Like you can learn more information by heart per day without losing too much of progress. If it's somewhere like 65, 60, you might want to take up fewer cards because you are barely scraping by. There is no point in forcing yourself to learn 50 new cards per day for an extended period of time, because you will not be able to get all of them right in a reasonable time frame. So I would start with 10. After 2 weeks, take a look at your retention rate. Maybe see like what's your personal feeling, what's the statistical evaluation. If you have a 90% valuation, maybe crank it up to 15 or 20. If not, either leave it and hope it gets better, or lower it. You need a bit of time to get used to Anki. Like when I started around December, and it took me 2 or 3 months to get used to this, probably because I didn't know how to set the daily cards correctly.
Okay, my recommendation would be try to do as much as you can. Naturally begin always for every lecture which you take, make a different deck, and try to answer all the questions until you know nearly all of them. Then take new cards. Do it, if possible, even several times a day, might be an idea. Just to train your brains that they are not allowed to forget stuff. This is the major advantage of such a repetition question system, that you force your brain to repeat the basic facts, especially for beginners in studies. When you begin with your studies, much of what you are confronted with is basic definitions. What is the meaning of a term? A certain list of possibilities, which kind of taxes exist, or categories. And so basic facts which you just have to learn by heart and be able to reproduce apart from understanding them naturally. And so here we have a kind of system where you can train your brain not to forget things. And my idea would be, before you learn new stuff in a lecture, always repeat the existing stuff until you are relatively easy with that stuff, and then add additional questions or so, partly on the old stuff, partly on new stuff, so that it's more and more which you have in your brain. Naturally, that works only over a long time. So don't wait till the end of the semester. Don't become one of the students who say, I have an exam in 14 days, so next week I have to start learning. Because that's only comforting your conscience, and that's programmed failing. The decisive thing here is build up your knowledge over a long time, and such a program or such a repetition question system helps you not to forget things, because later, after 3 years or so, all the basics will still play a role for you. And naturally, once you are on the job, people will expect that you know basic facts still after years. And training it this way might be very, very helpful not to forget things. If over half a year you have forced your brain not to forget things, it will probably remember things 2 or 3 years later. And that's the great advantage which you have with such a learning system. Okay, Christian, back to you.
There are 2 points left in my agenda. One would be add-ons, because so you have a certain list of add-ons. There is a website on ankiweb.net which gives you a whole list, a plethora of add-ons, more or less useful, but I will introduce a few that I found useful. My Anki is quite filled with add-ons because I use it extensively for language learning, but you can go into tools, add-ons. And what I recommend is true retention, which is a modifier to the Anki algorithm. It kind of tests again and again if you truly know a card, and if you don't, it will be basically put back into your learning stack. So if you have forgotten your basics without thinking, is this a basic or not? If you just say no, then that's it. It's getting put back into the learning stack. So you will have to relearn it. Then this one is probably one of the most useful ones. It introduces this little thing here, this bar, the calendar. It shows you how many cards you did per day and your streak. So anyone who is familiar with apps for language learning like Duolingo know that they gamify things a lot with achievements and rewards, and everything is colorful and flashy. This is kind of the same. Some people are motivated by their previous achievements. So for example, I've only failed to do Anki 2 days this year. I've been doing this consecutively for 174 days. And if I'm really not motivated today, then I would think, do I want to give up my Anki streak? 174 days just down the drain. No, I think I will do it even though I don't want to. So I will do it, more or less. I would call this a productive Stockholm syndrome, because sometimes you don't like to study, but you still go back to it. So that's like on the side of add-ons, true retention and the review heat map are the ones that I really recommend. The rest are kind of quality of life and for card formatting that I have, so they're not so important. Lastly, you said that you can do decks on your own for other subjects. So I want to get into this. Let's make another deck. I will call it taxation. And I will make another one for the next semester. I will call it business tax. For business tax, I will add a card. So let's say this is the front side and this is the back side. Okay. Now we can see business tax has one card, taxation has none, but what I can do is I can take my general tax law, I drag it into here. I take my business tax law and I drag it into here. Wait, come on. There we go. And if I now just click taxation, you can see this one is 1 review, this one is 12 reviews, it's 13 here. If I just click this one, it will review every single course that was integrated into this. So as you progress your studies, you can just dump all of your information into a deck, put everything into one main deck, and in the morning you click it, and it will ask every single question in the whole curriculum that is scheduled for that day, which is immensely useful.
Especially with regard to the fact that in some curriculum rules, you can, at the end of your studies in our 7th semester taxation, for example, be questioned everything which you learned during your whole studies. So there are some lectures and exams where you are explicitly tortured, no, not tortured, but confronted with all the stuff which you had and are required to operate and solve cases exactly with all what you learned before. So doing this might be a nice investment. Yeah.
Especially with the taxation subjects, you can never forget anything. So let's say you will take general tax now, business tax later. You require general tax law for business tax law, and even later, as you get into the last into the last courses, let's say you take tax planning in the end, you will require your basics. You can never forget this. It's not a subject where you can study, dump it all out in the exam, and then you leave the door of the examination room and you've forgotten everything. It's not like this. You cannot afford to forget things, and Anki is kind of the most stress-free way to retain new information while learning, to retain old information while learning new ones. So yeah. I don't have anything else on my agenda. Based on this video, if you go back now and if you haven't understood a part, you can go back in the video, go through each step again. You know how to download it. You know how to install a deck, whether or not we put it on Moodle or the shared deck online website. You know how to make an account and synchronize it with your phone if you have an Android phone. You know how to use the card. I will sort this out so it's properly ordered. You know how to add a card and the benefits of doing so. You know how to you don't know how to export and share decks. I skipped over this. Exporting. If you want to export a deck, if you want to share it with friends or whatever, for some reason, if you ever want to export a deck, let's say I will delete this now to make sure that it's in your file. You will go to File, you go to Export, then you select Anki deck package, and then you basically just select your deck. So I would say General Tax Law, then I can click Export. Okay. 1 second. There we have it. That's it. And then you can send this to someone. They can click it as you saw in the beginning, and they will get it in their Anki. Okay. You know how to...
Where you can even question each other. So you can see if you, for example, thought something is not important to know, but it shows up in the question desk of somebody else, and then you see, okay, at least one person on Earth regards this information as important, so the professor or a later examiner might also regard it as important, so have a look at it and learn it. Yeah.
You might, so here's something. If you have a business tax, for example, in the next semester, and you will not be provided an Anki deck, and you have enough friends to make one for each chapter, here's what you can do. You would have an Anki deck, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, blah, blah. And you can click a card, or you can select several cards, and you can click Change Deck. So you can merge decks together. This way, you can quickly exchange yourself. You can quickly go over each thing. You can make a group effort to learn things. And afterwards, you can go through it. If you still don't know, if you still have a question, if there is a card missing for a slide, then you know that you can add it manually. So it can be all recombined, merged. You can change single cards. Let's say I will be merciful enough to make a business tax deck. You will download it and merge it with your own. That way, you get the best of both sides.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
All right.
And
it was a pleasure.
I hope that helps the one or other of our beginners. It's a nice idea to organize learning in a way that it is a bit of playing around with technology, and it also keeps you up to, let's say, up to date with all your knowledge, so that you train not to forget things and not to learn them only for a short period of time. Okay, if we are through now, then I think we stop the video now and hope for as much or as many beginners as possible who use this program or who learn in a similar way just by putting questions on papers or so. But the important thing is learn, not to forget things, because that's really what you are paid for after your studies, that you know things and not that you just passed an exam and then forgot all the basic stuff. Yeah, thank you very much. I hope we see each other soon again, and have a good day all together. Yeah, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.